Hi, my name's Nikolai, aka 56Miner, and today we're unboxing our premium December box. This month's box is going to be a mixed media box packed full of color. We'll go over the materials, talk about different ways to combine them, and I'll share some tips and tricks that I picked up while working with everything. Let's get into it. For our surface this month, we have a hot press watercolor paper pad from the Rembrandt company. This smooth textured paper is perfect for a variety of mediums and is super absorbent. Our first art supply is going to be a custom curated set of the King Art Pro fine liners. Fine liners offer us smooth and consistent lines, and we can imply a sense of distance by varying the space between those lines. They're also great for pointillism, which is when we create value by densely packing an area full of dots. We can take the same principle and apply it to lines, and that technique is called hatching, or cross-hatching. And of course, fine liners are also great for line work, which we can thicken up by going over our lines, or by creating some line weight variants by filling in areas. This month for a warm-up, I thought it'd be fun for us to sketch some of our favorite art supplies from the year. I'll start by doing a marker, since we shipped those last month, using a loose sheet of paper as a ruler. Next, I'll enclose my shape and add a few lines to help imply that form. To differentiate the cap from the rest of our marker, I'm going to utilize parallel lines at an angle. Now I know sketching with fine liners can be a bit intimidating, but we can take off some of that pressure by starting with a light color and then overlaying a darker one. Next, I'm going to do a brush utilizing some guide techniques that we talked about in our technical drawing box. Here I'm doing a flat brush because we shipped it in our October box, but I think my personal favorite was the tri-wedge from our illustrative gouache box. For my pencil, I'm going to thicken the lines on one side, and that'll imply a bit more form and three-dimensionality. If you've been a premium subscriber for the entire year, you would have received 9 different watercolors and 5 different gouaches, so let's do a paint tube. I'm going to start with the light blue, and then go in with our darker blue to add some more details. And then to fill up that negative space, and for a bit of fun, I'll go in and add a few sparkles around our art supplies. The next item in our box is going to be a watercolor dot card from the Daniel Smith Company. Dot cards are a great way to explore a variety of colors without committing to a full tube. Let's grab the Princeton pointed filbert included in this month's box and explore some of the shapes that our brush can make. Depending on how much pressure we apply, we can create both thick and thin lines with our brush. And by varying that pressure, we can create lines with a lot of line weight variance to them, like we talked about in our abstract floral box in January. If you're looking to level up your brushwork this month, I definitely suggest doing a series of small leaves, as they're a great way to familiarize yourself with your brush, but also to practice that line weight variance. Here I'll do a single stroke leaf, and a wide leaf using multiple strokes, cleaning up my edges with the tip of our brush. To get a better idea of the colors available to us this month, I've gone ahead and swatched out our dot card on some of our Rembrandt paper. We've curated this dot card to create some fun, bright colors, but have also included some jewel tones and neutrals, giving you the widest variety of hues of these premium watercolors. And if you're looking to practice your color theory this month, try mixing your own secondary colors with these primaries. It's a great exercise to improve your color skills and train yourself to distinguish between different hues. Taking a wet brush, I'll activate our watercolor on our dot card, and I'm going to use it to show you how I created the flowers from this month's featured artwork. Using a fair amount of water, I'll start by establishing the silhouette of our blossoms. While that surface is still wet, I'll dip in some of our quinacridone magenta and more of our opera pink in order to make some subtle gradients. Now this process isn't floral specific, so if you'd like to do something other than a flower this month, try taking some inspiration from our prompt, Dream. Having created a few leaves with our permanent green light, I'll go back in with our phthalo green, focusing on the edges to create a sense of form with our blooming technique. Now before we move on to our next step, it's important that we allow our paper to dry fully before going in with our fine liners and establishing our line art. I'll start by establishing the petals closest to the viewer and then working my way back in our scene. As we're working in a more simplified style, we don't have to worry about being too realistic. I'll take in consideration how the pigment pooled on our flowers in order to imply structure, but I'm not going to be too beholden to it. I really enjoy the loose gradient that the watercolor affords us in contrast to the hard lines of our fine liners. As a final step, I'll go back in with our quinacridone magenta and fill in the center of our blossoms, making sure not to go over our lines as the fine liner pigment will reactivate when wet. Let's grab the last 3 items in our box, a set of Holbein acrylic gouache in Juan Brilliant, light green, and magenta. Traditionally, gouache can be thought of as a more opaque and matte watercolor. Because we're working with acrylic gouache, this gouache is going to act a little bit more like an acrylic paint. Here, I'm diluting the gouache with a little bit of water. This will allow us to get semi-transparent layers, but it'll offer a more consistent color spread than a traditional watercolor. By working in thicker layers, we can get a more opaque and solid color. I always like to dilute my gouache with just a little bit of water though, as this can avoid any kind of cracking. Historically, gouache is used to fill in large areas of flat color, which made it a favorite amongst graphic designers. Now that we have a good understanding of our materials, let's take what we learned and do something a bit more complex. I'm going to stick with our theme of art supplies and sketch out a small ink bottle. Over the course of the last year, we shipped 20 unique ink-based art supplies. Now if drawing consistent shapes is tricky for you, make sure to go back and check out our technical drawing video that we did in February, or our July video with our tinted graphite pans. With my bottle established, I'm going to go in with a permanent light green and use our wet on wet technique, utilizing the phthalo green to get some nice color variance. I just love how this technique offers really smooth gradients and transitions. It's also really great if you want to do anything kind of galaxy themed. With that first layer dry, I'm going to go in with our Mayan dark blue and use that for our bottle lid. When working in watercolor, it's really important that you let your layers dry first, as watercolor has a tendency to spread out wherever the wet surface is. We can combat this by letting each layer dry so that pigment settles into the paper a bit. This will allow us to build value and to create a greater sense of form in whatever we're depicting. For our bottle label, I'm going to use some of our light green acrylic gouache, as the matte texture of our gouache is going to help stand out a bit more from the watercolor. For our background, I'm going to mix up a little bit of our Juan Brilliant and our magenta. This is also how I created the different pinks in the flowers of the featured artwork this month. Now mixing secondary colors with gouache is notoriously difficult. While the color theory aspect is pretty straightforward, mixing the same color twice is known to be difficult. To combat this, I always suggest mixing a little bit more than needed, that way you don't have to worry about running out. I'm going to be cropping down my piece, so I'm not going to worry about filling in the entire page. With my surface fully dry, I'll go back in with my fine liners and add a bit more structure to our bottle. I always suggest starting out with your lighter colors first, as we can always go over our lines with darker colors, but we really can't lighten them. We can also use our King Art Pro fine liners right on top of the gouache, so I'm going to use it to label our bottle and to add some ridge lines to our cap. And just for fun, we'll bring back our sparkles and add them as a background element. I'm going to use our pink and red fine liners, as they are going to be complementary colors to our greens of our ink bottle. Complementary colors are colors that are typically on the opposite side of the color wheel, so a few other examples are going to be orange and blue, and purple and yellow. That's all for this month's video. Hope you enjoyed it, learned a few things, and if you post your work online, make sure you use hashtag SketchBoxDecember. We love seeing what y'all create each month, and if you want to check out any of our previous videos, head over to our YouTube channel where you can like and subscribe, and I'll see you next month.